The hollow came before I could name what I was watching for. Not a sound, earlier than a sound. A dropping sensation in my gut, like something had quietly given way before the reason had arrived. I was standing in front of my father. My sister was beside me. He had found something that displeased him. The room did what it always did when this happened. It tightened, the air going dense at the edges and the space between us becoming something I could feel against my skin. Then his voice went up, and my jaw locked. My lip began to tremble in that specific, involuntary precursor to tears that is not yet crying, but is the body making a very clear announcement. It still does this, even now. If a man raises his voice, my husband, his father, a boss, really any authority in a room, my lip goes before I've decided anything. The anger doesn't have to be directed at me, it just has to be like in the vicinity. My nervous system has not received the update that this particular room is 30 years gone. He was asking questions, but they weren't questions. They were accusations waiting to land. Often I was already the assumed answer. This wasn't a bad day. This was just a day. It could have been any day. My body filed it. I didn't have a name for what I was tracking, so I did what I always did. I asked why. But in my house, why was a spark. It sounded like attitude to adults who didn't know how to hear sincerity. The way I moved through rooms, literal, curious, asking things out loud that other kids seemed to know to keep inside, didn't match what was expected of me. Questions weren't interpreted as curiosity, they were treated as defiance. Talking back, he called it. His words, his framework, not mine. My sister had figured out something that I hadn't. I could see it in her body, the way she stood slightly turned, not quite facing him, and not quite away, her hands still, her face careful. She wasn't frozen, she was calibrated. Whatever the system was, she had read it, and I had not. Back in that room, once the silence held long enough that something had to give, the questions started tumbling out of me. What did I do wrong? Why is this wrong? What should I have done instead? And with every question, his anger escalated. My sister's elbow hit mine, harder than a nudge. The message was unambiguous. Stop. Be quiet. Survive. I can't. I don't know how. Afterward, she'd find me. She was never cruel about it, not really. She was frustrated in the way you're frustrated watching someone you love keep touching the hot stove. Why did you do that? Why can't you just take it? If you'd shut up and gone along, it would have been over faster. Her logic was absolutely sound. I could see that it was sound. I could hold it in my head and still feel my mouth opening. Just couldn't make myself do the thing she was describing. Couldn't locate the mechanism that would let me swallow the question before it came out. She thought it was a choice I was making badly. I didn't yet know that it wasn't a choice at all. But she had given me something. Proof. If she could read the room, then the room was readable. There was a system. Finding it became the project. That was the other thing no one else seemed to notice, that I was trying to solve it. Every question I asked that came out as defiance was an attempt to locate the rule so I could follow it correctly next time. I was doing research. It just looked like mouthing off. I'm missing large portions of my childhood. Whole seasons that aren't there when I reach them. Orange spray paint is one memory that stayed, and I couldn't tell you why that one and not the others. I took a can of his neon orange spray paint and painted a few rocks around our property. Not graffiti, not destruction, just rocks. It seemed harmless to me, almost playful, whimsical even. I still don't know why I did it. I only remember what hit me before he said a word. The sound of the kitchen door, the way the air changed, something tightening across my shoulders before I had fully turned around, the way a body learns to brace before the reason arrives. My first move was always to deny it, not that I'd done it, but that it had been what they said it was. Like, face full of snot and tears. You've seen the memes. Little kids photographed mid denial, faces and hands covered in chocolate with the Hershey's syrup bottle sitting right there, their expression still somehow cherubic. That was not me. I cried like I was about to die. Sometimes punishment was the belt. I have a vague memory, an impression more than a scene, of his hand on my back, the belt in the other, and me bent over the bed. Dad was exasperated, telling me to calm down. Like, why all this screaming over a few smacks? That's all it ever was. I was screaming at the spanking I had yet to receive, confused, desperate, already inconsolable, and neither of us could account for the other. Sometimes it was standing still in a corner of a room until my legs burned. Sometimes it was picking up cigarette butts in the yard, which, given how the ashtray story had ended, was almost funny, except that it fucking wasn't. The form changed, the rule didn't. To this day, I don't really understand why it mattered so much, but at some point the question of why had nowhere left to go. I was 11 or 12. We had had another row. I couldn't tell you what it started on, only that it had the same shape it always had. This time I had run off. On a ranch in the middle of the nowhere, that meant the cattle trailer. I was curled up beside it, breathing hard and scanning the yard. Too big to hide under the bed at that point, but defiant enough to stand there with my chin out. But the rage was just too much to hold inside that house. And I could hear him on the phone with my mother. She was at work. His exasperated voice came out across the yard in pieces, that deep, resonant bass floating into the dusk. Most words, but not all. What reached me, he didn't understand me. I pulled my knees in. The trailer was cold through my shirt. I stayed there while his voice finished and the yard came back. Dusk and the smell of rust and manure and silence. Something had settled that I hadn't known was in the air. Not the punishment, not the specific rule I hadn't found. It was me. I was the thing that didn't translate. I was already doing what I would later call world building, running scenarios, mapping cause and effect, building a full prototype in my head before I could trust myself to act on any of it. Part people pleasing, part punishment avoidance, and part genuine hunger to understand. Punishment didn't always look the same. As I got older, it shifted shape. Walking laps, reading Revelation, writing essays meant to teach obedience through exhaustion. The method varied, the message remained consistent. Questions made things worse, and yet the questions kept coming. I was a girl who checked out every book on ballet the library had and every book on gymnastics because those girls had something I couldn't name yet. Some combination of pointed feet and strength and femininity the body had to earn. And I was jealous of them in a way that had nowhere to go except the library stacks. I still watch shows like Dance Academy and Make It or Break It. They are what I turn to when my world feels chaotic. I don't consider this a problem. I was also the one who wanted to build alongside her dad, but was told to stand back and hold the bucket instead. I was 19 when the thought arrived. Um, I'd been trying to be his firstborn son in a weird way. Not to be a boy, but to be the one he thought was worth showing how. I still find myself defaulting to that position, deferring to whoever seems most like the person who's supposed to be in charge. And when I finally don't, it looks like this. ripping out dated stair railing, designing a replacement from scratch, sourcing every part, building it by hand, sanding it laboriously between each coat of whitewash and varnish until it's exactly what I saw in my head. From the outside, it probably looks unhinged. It isn't. It's 40 years of holding the bucket. The problem was never the wanting. It was that I couldn't figure out the system I was operating inside of, and the system kept changing without notice. The irony is that I wasn't rebellious. I wasn't testing anything. I was trying as hard as I could, trying to connect, to be good, to follow rules that kept changing without knowing what good meant in their language. What I didn't understand until much later was that my dad knew exactly what this felt like. His own father never understood him either. He had a younger brother who seemed more beloved, and I vaguely remember hearing my dad and grandpa get into fistfights at Thanksgiving. Alcohol was involved, as if fists needed a reason, but sure, let's just say it was alcohol. He was earnest too, in a way that didn't look like mine. As a boy, he used to scrounge old TVs and radios, taking them apart to see how they worked. He'd reassemble them into things. Not always things that had names, just things that made sense to him. Sometimes he blew the fuses in the house doing it. I think about that sometimes when I remember the spray paint. The same weird instinct that made him pull apart a radio just to see what was inside, just expressed differently. Whether he could have recognized it, I genuinely don't know. I've done the math on it 100 times. Two people who couldn't read each other, separated by 30 years. I can trace the lines of how that happens, but I don't know if tracing the lines is the same thing as understanding it, or if I'm just doing the thing I always do, which is explain instead of feel.